Cast your whole vote, not a strip of paper merely, but your whole influence, Thoreau wrote in Civil Disobedience after going to jail for refusing to pay his taxes during the Mexican-American War. A minority is powerless when it conforms to the majority. It is not even a minority then, but it is irresistible when it clogs by its whole weight. If the alternative is to keep all just men in prison or give up war and slavery, the state will not hesitate what to choose. If 1,000 men were not to pay their tax bills this year, that would not be a violent and bloody measure, as it would be to pay them and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood. Those who recognize the injustice of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as Iran, who concede that these wars are not only a violation of international law, but under post-Nuremberg laws are defined as criminal wars of aggression, yet continue to support a Democratic Party that supports these wars, have forfeited their rights as citizens. By allowing the status quo to go unchallenged, they become agents of injustice. To do nothing is to do something, and they practice a faux morality. They take refuge in the conception of themselves as moderates. They stand on what they insist is the middle ground without realizing that the middle ground has shifted under us, that the old paradigm of left and right, liberal and conservative is meaningless in a world where, to quote Immanuel Kant, we live in a time of radical evil. Nothing has changed for Muslims in the Middle East under the Obama administration. The wars of occupation go on or have expanded. Israel continues to flout international law, gobbling up more Palestinian land and carrying out egregious war crimes in Gaza. Calcified, repressive regimes in countries such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia are feted in Washington as allies, and Muslim rage is stoked because we station tens of thousands of American troops on Muslim soil, occupy 2 Muslim nations, and do nothing to halt the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine. The Muslim world fears correctly that we intend to dominate Middle East oil supplies and any Caspian Sea oil infrastructure, and it does not want our protestations of goodwill, but they want the elemental right of justice and freedom from foreign occupation, and we would react should the situation be reversed no differently. The brutal reality of expanding foreign occupation and the harsher and harsher forms of control are the real tinder of Islamic fundamentalism, insurgencies, and terrorism. We can try and blame the violence on the clash of civilizations. We can naively tell ourselves that we are envied for our freedoms. We can point to the Quran. But these are fantasies that divert us from facing the central dispute between us and the Muslim world, from facing responsibility for the virus of chaos and violence spreading throughout the Middle East. We can have peace if we shut down our network of military bases, stay the hand of Israel to create a Palestinian state and go home, or we can have long, costly, and ultimately futile regional war. There is a direct correlation between our permanent war economy and the mounting foreclosures, unemployment, and collapse of our civil society.
That's right.
We cannot single out any national institutions anymore that can accurately be described as democratic. Surely not the highly manipulated, money-saturated elections, the lobby-infested Congress, the imperial presidency, the class-biased judicial and penal system, and least of all, the media. Athenian democracy collapsed, Thucydides wrote, because of Athens' expanding empire. Athens became a tyrant abroad, and then a tyrant at home. The tyranny Athens imposed on others, it finally imposed on itself. and those who caution prudence and moderation, who remain within the grip of the Democratic Party, abet the crimes committed in our name and the snuffing out of our open society. I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate, King wrote from another era as he sat in a Birmingham jail. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his strive toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And this lukewarm acceptance, this failure to act, is the worst form of moral cowardice. It cripples and destroys. When Dante enters the city of woes in the Inferno, he hears the cries of those whose lives earned neither honor nor bad fame, those rejected by heaven and hell, those who dedicated their lives solely to the pursuit of happiness. They are all the good people, the ones who never made a fuss, who filled their lives with vain and empty pursuits, harmless, no doubt, to amuse themselves, and who never took a stand for anything, never risked anything, who went along. They never looked too hard at their lives, never felt the need, never wanted to look. The philosopher Theodor Adorno wrote that this exclusive preoccupation with personal concerns and indifference to the suffering of others beyond the self-identified group is what made fascism and finally the Holocaust possible. It is we who are guilty for sending these young men and women to wars that did not have to be fought. It is we who are guilty for turning away from the truth of war to wallow in a self-aggrandizing myth, guilty because we create and decorate killers when they come home, maimed and broken, and discard them. We face a crisis. Our democratic institutions are being ruthlessly dismantled by the corporate state. We have embarked on a program of perpetual war, and we are paralyzed by fear. To resist, while there's still time, is not only the highest form of spirituality, but the highest form of patriotism. It is, if you care about what is worth protecting in this country, a moral imperative. Yes. As Immanuel Kant, moral autonomy is possible only through reflection, self-determination, and finally the courage not to cooperate. There are hundreds of thousands who have died in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the number would be dwarfed by a war with Iran. Not a lot is being asked of us. Compare our potential sacrifices with what is being inflicted on and demanded of those trapped in the cauldrons of violence in Iraq, Afghanistan, and soon perhaps Iran. Courage, as Aristotle wrote, is the highest of human virtues, because without it, we are unlikely to practice any other virtue,